Hello, this is Abby.
Dear Abby, this is gonna be a long one.
Oh boy.
Dear Abby, how do you tell the difference between a new exciting crush and a rebound?
Does it matter?
Dear Abby.
Dear Abby.
Dear Abby.
Welcome to our little corner of the internet. This is the Dear Abby podcast. I hope you stay and hang out with us. See you in a sec. All right, let's hit it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Dear Abby. I'm your host, and my name is Abby. You send your voicemails, texts, questions to me, who doesn't know anything and just gives you advice that is solicited because you are asking me. Welcome back. I am... As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I guess you can't see, but I have a heating pad. I have a heating pad on my uterus. You can guess why. And today is and I am not feeling great today because I'm a woman, and for multiple weeks out of the month, your body just doesn't feel that good, and that's okay. And I am okay with that. But on these days, I will take it easy and use a heating pad. Just don't want you to be weirded out if you see that. So if you're new to my podcast, we have some new listeners, so welcome. Thank you for listening if you're new. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoy my podcast. And I hope this is like a little safe space and corner of the internet for you to just come hang and also hear about other people's stories with OCD, anxiety, depression, mental illness, and also I talk about mine a lot and things that I've learned, experiences that I've had to relate to everyone, because I know we're not alone in almost everything that we go through. And I always say that, and I never mean to discredit people's experiences as saying that everyone experiences stuff like that, but I think because it's just as deeply painful, even if everybody else has experienced it, for you if you're experiencing it, so it doesn't take away the pain. But I also acknowledge and think it's important to acknowledge that we're not alone, so that way we can actually be there for other people and open ourselves up to be comforted, especially in our mental illness. So that about sums up my podcast. Okay, I'm going to give some life updates because I've had kind of a crazy week, and there's some good stories here, and then I'll do some dubs and L's from the week, and then we'll get into the meat of the episode. I just want to talk about bravery, and I know it might sound a little bit dramatic, but I think everybody is very brave, and we all and because we all go through very lonely phases of our lives, very hard phases of our lives, very scary and uncertain times in our lives, and it takes a lot of bravery to get back up and try again, and to keep believing in something good, and to keep pushing forward, and also sometimes to not just push forward, but to take a second and slow down and receive love and receive good things. That takes a lot of bravery. So I kind of wanted to just remind everybody of that and take a second to acknowledge that. And work through anything that comes up, because I noticed that for me when I do talk about or I hear someone talk about how brave people with anxiety or OCD are or whatever, and I just like internally roll my eyes kind of a thing, and I just think they're buttering me up, and they're, I'm not a baby and whatever, all of these like defensive things, or just like annoyed that someone would say that. But when I get a little bit more curious about why I get immediately annoyed or something, I've just learned a lot about myself and how I can actually receive compliments and receive good things, and acknowledge that we do have positive traits about us, and also how OCD can lie to us and make us feel just only fragile and only weak and only disempowered and only scared. And I think it's really good at lying to us and gaslighting us into thinking, like, I know that's a buzzword, but I genuinely think that with OCD, your brain like gaslights you. So I think it's important to break that down and to recognize that, so that we can receive compliments and we can acknowledge the positive things about ourselves. And so we're going to talk about that. Okay. And then we'll do a Dear Abby, of course. And then we'll end today's episode. Okay. So this past week, I've done a couple of things. One, I went snorkeling, and I went snorkeling just a couple days ago, and it was a horrifying experience. I'd always watch people snorkel on YouTube videos and vlogs and GoPro advertisements and just like stuff like that. And I always thought it looked really calming and relaxing and pretty. And that's because most of those people were recording in Hawaii or in very calm, clear waters. And so that was my expectation of when I go snorkeling. That's how it's going to be. I have never thought about that you have to breathe through your mouth while you're underwater. So it's very counterintuitive. And that freaked me the freak out, because keep in mind, I talked about this last week on the podcast, is somatic OCD and breathing and noticing my throat size and am I choking, and what if like my, what is it called? My automatic functions, I don't remember, just like don't work anymore, stuff like that. So breathing is a big one. And for exposures, I've been doing where you hold your breath and you try to get that panicky feeling. And so when we went snorkeling, I didn't even think about that. I was like nervous, but I was not gonna, but I've learned that I can't talk myself into things. A lot of the times when you are in your head a lot, you can talk yourself out of anything, but you can't talk yourself into things. Like for me, at least, I can't, like, for example, I just knew I wanted to try snorkeling because why not? I like the ocean. I want to see what's under there, I think. I'm good at swimming. I like swimming. A cold plunge feels nice. I'm going with my fiance, so that's fun. But when I got there and we're like getting ready, I started to talk myself out of it in my head. Like I started to think of why I don't have to go. I don't really want to go anyways. It's not going to change my life, blah, blah, blah. And I so easily was able to talk myself out of it. But then I tried to talk myself into it, and that just wasn't helping, because the no is so loud and it's so dominant. And it's also just, your mind can't wrap around a lot of things, most things, honestly. It can't see past what you're experiencing now, and it can't really think to the future, like the lazy part of your mind, or the wants comfort, wants what's, it doesn't want you to go to something that you don't know. So your brain's very good at convincing you to stay where you are. And even if it's something small like trying snorkeling, for someone who is who normally has an anxious brain, in their past, when they're trying to do something new, it is still really convincing you to not do something new. So I've learned about myself that I just have to do it and to not think about it. If I like, logically, I know it's safe, probably. I mean, sure, something bad could happen, but that's life. But the pros were outweighing the cons, the risks. So I just did it. Didn't think about it. Didn't think about all the bad things that could happen, because it just wasn't helpful in that situation. And I did it. I got in, and we went to the beach, and we're in Southern California, and a lot of the beaches are not super Hawaii vibes and calm, clear. It was not. It was kind of a foggy day. It was cloudy. It was really dark in the water. You couldn't really see anything. And it was also pretty choppy. And so I get out there, I start swimming. Keaton brought a bunch of stuff for me, but we had to borrow his brother's fins to kick around, and they were way too big. And I literally had to knuckle, like I'm going to do a fist bump with my foot. That's how I had to contort my foot to keep the fins on. So it was not the vibe for being tossed around in the ocean and snorkeling. I was already really anxious, and I was trying to calm myself down, but it was freezing cold, and the snorkel and the fins weren't fitting, and so they kept falling off. So I took them off, swam back, put them away, came back in the water because I wanted to at least try to get used to breathing underwater with the snorkel thing with the mask. So Keaton was sweet enough to stay with me in the not interesting area and just practice putting my head in, and then I'd go underwater, and then it took a lot of convincing, but he was kind of helping me learn how to breathe underwater with the thing and be comfortable with it. Like if there's water gets in, I was like, oh my gosh, what happens if water gets in the thing? Will I just inhale a bunch of water, and then if I choke and then I can't breathe through my nose because the mask is plugging my nose? And it's like, that's where, it's a freaky feeling because it's very counterintuitive. Like I said, you can't breathe through your nose, which I've been teaching myself to only breathe through my nose. But then now you're putting your nose and your mouth underwater, and then you breathe through your mouth. It's like you have to think about it really. For me, I had to really concentrate on just my breathing. So I couldn't really even see anything because I was just concentrating on like, okay, breathe in through my mouth. I exhale this way. So after about 10 minutes of being out, I was like, okay, I'm getting a little panicky because I'm kind of tired now. And it hasn't really clicked yet, and it's really murky, and so it's just kind of more scaring me than anything. And I feel like I was holding him back, so I was like, I'm just going to swim to shore, and I'm fine to just vibe on the beach. And so that's what I did. But I was really proud of myself for going, and I'll probably like snorkeling another day when it's sunny and maybe more clear and I have fins that fit me, because then I'll be comfortable. And also, the reason I wasn't comfortable is because you have to swim far out. And also we were by a bunch of rocks. So it was very rocky, and which is why you need the fins, because it's kind of pushing you towards the rocks. You have to, I don't know, be a strong enough swimmer. So I could see myself snorkeling in water someday with clear water and also calm water. But that was just not the circumstance, and that's okay. I didn't love it, and that's okay. I don't have to love everything. In fact, my grandma told me that. I think she replied to my story, and she said something about how she didn't always love doing everything that grandpa did, but she just was supportive and was happy to be there and whatever. And that's okay, which I thought was kind of a nice lesson, because I liked forcing myself to do things that are scare me. But also if I don't enjoy it, then it's like I don't really want to force myself to do something that I don't enjoy. And it's not like a comfort thing. Sometimes it is just like, I just don't want to do it. I'd rather do something else. So I think that was kind of a good reminder. So thank you, Grandma. I don't think you listened, but thank you. The other thing that happened this week is we had a murder mystery party at Chelsea's house, and she invited some of her friends. I don't know all of them super well, but because I see them a lot more now, I'm starting to get to know all of her friends, which is fun. And nothing's a better icebreaker than any type of role play situation, Dungeons and Dragons, murder mystery, anything like that that's like nerdy. I will be there and I will commit to the bit. I think if my sister wasn't there and I didn't have like Keaton and my sister and, them, I don't think I would have felt as comfortable to be crazy, but that's just how I grew up. So I'm very comfortable in those situations. Now, everybody starts taking pictures. I'm not comfortable. I feel not comfortable. That thing, I feel very comfortable. My character was supposed to be a girl, obviously, and I was a stowaway, so I was supposed to just be confused, like, I don't know what's going on, But then, unfortunately, people dropped out last minute, so Chelsea had to change some characters around, and so I was then a man. I had to play a man, and I tried to commit to it, and now my throat is killing me because the murder mystery was, I didn't even say this, the theme of the murder mystery was pirates, and I was the captain's right-hand man, so I was like the main fighter, the strongest, if you will. The strongest, probably the funniest, I don't know, the best fighter, the most charming, does the best with the ladies, ruthless, fearless, and that was my character that I had to play, and that was my character, so it was fun to role play. And also, and the worst and best part about it was that Keaton was the captain and I was his right-hand man, so I had to pull Keaton aside before and say, hey, don't make any sexual jokes, okay? Not a lot of them. One or two, maybe. If you keep going, I'm not going to have fun, because he does it every time we play Dungeons and Dragons. He does it every single time we are at any murder mystery, anything. It turns into the same thing every time. And I'm someone that if I'm playing and doing something, I'm a rule follower. Okay. I am such a rule follower. It is in my DNA. It makes me feel better. If there's a campaign or if there's a goal in mind when we're doing a role play, anything, I need to get to that goal. And that is all I can really focus on. I'll have fun in between, but I will reel it in to make sure we get the job done. He is not like that. He is like, he couldn't be more opposite than that. He just wants to make jokes, which isn't bad. Okay, I'm not saying it's bad at all, but we have to but we have to compromise, okay? And we had to. I said, you can say a couple of jokes. Other than that, you have to let me be in character in business, okay? He probably had the best pirate accent, and he was the captain, so we had to go full out. He did very good, I will say. I didn't get any videos of him being the captain, but I think probably Chelsea or JC or somebody did, because I think Chelsea has a clip that's hilarious. And he had a hook, so I told him not to poke me with the hook all the time. Those are the two life updates. Dubs and L's. Dubs are, I've been cooking very healthy meals for myself, a lot of home cooking, and a lot of making things from scratch, which is a lot of time, but honestly, it just slows my life down in the best way, and I just can kind of focus on what really matters instead of feeling like I have to be so busy, because that doesn't really make me feel good. I hate being super busy. I'm not present with anyone when I'm super busy, and it's like a whole day goes by and then I realize I was never really like alive or awake the whole day. So I like cooking because it makes me slow down and have to think about what I'm doing and be very intentional and prepared and plan well. My L for this week, I think, is just that my period is taking me out. I've been having way more painful periods that I never really was someone that got cramps. I got like the normal period, like they're not cramps. Like I wouldn't call that period feeling a cramp. It's more like it's very specific. Like when people say I have cramps on my period, I'm like, I don't know are you talking about the period feeling where it's like in your uterus, you can tell that it's shedding its lining. Like that's how it feels. It doesn't feel like a cramp. It feels like it's shedding. That's how it feels to me. If that's what everyone's saying with cramps, then yes, I've had those my whole life. But they don't feel like cramps. Because cramps are like, I don't know, cramps just feel different. But lately, they've been really painful. That feeling has been way more intense where my whole body is kind of shutting down for a bit. For the past like year, I've been getting almost like flu symptoms the day of and the day after. And so for 2 days out of the month, I just like feel like I have the flu for, the whole time. Feel like there's something wrong with something that because I don't think that's not normal from what I understand. So I got to figure that out. And then I also just am so tired with that. I feel like that's kind of normal, but okay, let's get into the meat of today's episode, which is bravery, but it's really not just focus on bravery. I think it's just, I wanted to mostly speak on the way that that mental illness and OCD can gaslight you into thinking that you literally are only OCD and that you have no other good qualities and that you're only bad, you're only OCD, you're only scared, you're only weak, you're only, all the bad things. Today, I wanted to talk about how helpful it can be to acknowledge, to maybe just be aware of the patterns and the way you talk to yourself, especially when someone is saying something positive about you or positive about people in general or positive about something that like a trait that you have or sometimes you see videos online or on YouTube or just people that talk about maybe something that you've been through or that you're going through, and they talk about it and they talk about how much strength you have or how much courage you have and how brave you are. And most of the time, most of us, if you're like me, you kind of roll your eyes at it and you also just don't really believe it. Like you're just like, yeah, that's not true. I'm not any of those things, or maybe you would like to think you were, but then you have a voice or something that's like, nah, that's not you. And then it probably proceeds to give you a bunch of reasons why that you can never be brave, you can never be successful, you can never be kind, all of these things. I have this internal battle sometimes of wanting to be kind to myself. So I'll say kind things to myself, I'll acknowledge positive things about myself, and I'll try to believe them. It's really hard because then I have this voice that comes up and is like, you're not any of those things. You are weak. You're just scared all the time. You've only ever been scared. You've only ever been OCD. You've only ever been anxious. And it kind of shoves me into a little box of just, that's all I am. I'm just scared. And I've only ever been scared. I've never done anything brave or courageous or exciting or new. That voice has gotten really loud because I've listened to it for a long time. But now, because I've been working on it, it's not as loud. And I also am able to kind of see past it and see it for what it is. Just a thought and just a feeling and just an inaccurate opinion and frankly, very irrelevant. I think there's a lot of work to be done that I don't know how to do for each person specifically, of how you can learn to trust yourself and not listen to that voice anymore and not just immediately agree with it. And when the voice I'm talking about is a negative voice, not the positive one. Lately, I've really been encouraging myself to talk positively to myself and not in like a compulsive way or, repeat it until I feel like I believe it. It's more in I am brave, and sometimes I feel scared. And sometimes, and I don't know the answers, and I am very uncertain at times because life is very uncertain and we don't have control over most things. And so the fact that I'm still pursuing the things that I am and I'm choosing to soften my heart, I'm choosing to believe in good things, I'm choosing to be kind to others. It's more like I'm just being really honest with myself, bringing myself back to reality sometimes. And that is the fact that I am not certain about a lot of things. And I am very scared about a lot of things. And I have a lot of thoughts that are negative. And I have a lot of thoughts that are sent to me that are very intrusive. And they do not feel good. And it's exhausting. And that is all what happens. But then there's also this other part that is, I have a beautiful mind. I am very imaginative. I have a great brain for imagination. I have a big heart and I'm sensitive, and there's a lot of things about me that are positive. It can be really easy to just keep giving in to that same voice and that same shameful voice or self-loathing or whatever it is, or just annoyed that people are trying to be nice. Just being bitter. It's really easy to give into that. But does it feel good? No. And there's probably a part of you that is dying to not be like that anymore. It is really hard to then start to not listen to that side of you and to not just take that as fact. It feels very unnatural when that's been your go-to, but that is something that has changed my life, is to let that voice do its thing, but also not to just believe it. It's important to remind yourself every once in a while of how brave you are and how much work you've done. And even if your brain is like right now when I say that's like, well, you're not recovered yet and you haven't fully recovered yet. You're not happy all the time. You sometimes still fall. You sometimes still talk bad about yourself. And that's like the voice. Like right now, that's what's happening in my brain. And I don't fully believe that. I think part of me, there's still a shame part of me. And that voice might not ever go away fully, but I can see that and also acknowledge that I have done so much work. And I've also tried so hard. And I have done my best. And you have done your best. If you have the thoughts of, well, it's not done yet, and if you have those thoughts that come up when like I'm even complimenting you now or saying these positive things, and that's natural because I think a lot of people have that exact same experience when people compliment them or they say something positive. But it doesn't change the fact that you know that you've put in so much work to get better at something, to be recovered from whatever you're going through. You are brave for not giving up, for even listening to my podcast, because you know it's going to be probably something about mental health. So you're trying to listen to maybe get knowledge or support or just some type of motivation or something to get you to keep trying to keep going and not give up. So that's something to be said. You still care very much. Sometimes OCD can make you feel like you don't care about anything, and depression obviously makes you feel like you don't care about anything because nothing's happening, in your brain. There's nothing happening, and that feels terrible, and I'm sorry, but you do care, and it just might take a long time to get that back. And you are brave for doing exposures. You are brave for trying to live your values despite the millions of things that OCD throws at you and anxiety throws at you. And the mountain, it feels like you're climbing every time you do something. When you are depressed or when you're carrying grief, you probably think you're being patient with yourself, but I think you can be way more patient with yourself. You deserve way more patience, and you deserve way more love. You deserve a really good life, and you can get that. That is possible. It might not feel like it sometimes, but feelings can lie. Yeah, I just think even though there's a lot of resilience that we can build, getting to that spot and building that resilience is hell. And it is hell on earth. But that is the road to be happier. From my experience, is you got to face all that stuff. You got to face that voice of shame. You can't just keep letting it run the show and just take that and run with it. You have to stand up for yourself, to your own brain sometimes. You have to show it who's boss. It's kind of how it feels. This might be a weird analogy, but I had a dog once. My ex-husband and I bought a dog when we first got married, and then once he left, he just left the dog with me. And I was happy about that, honestly, because I loved that dog, and I would have been more pissed if he took it. He left me with the dog, and I never ran with, and he was the one that would take the dog on runs because I didn't really like to run. I just like to walk, but he was a dog that needed miles of running every day. And so for a while, I only took him on 1 to 2 walks a day, and they weren't very long, and it didn't really get his heart rate up as much as he needed. And so he would, bite stuff at the house, and I would leave for work, or I would be working on my computer, and he would be nonstop. He was just, I think, under distress because I was not the best caretaker for his needs. When we'd go on walks, he was not really trained for walks or runs. I don't think my ex-husband really trained the dog on walks, obviously, because he would pull me, he would bark at other dogs. He wasn't aggressive, he had zero aggression, but he was just a playful dog. He was very curious, but he just wanted to play with everything that he saw. I never took the lead, and I never acted like the leader for him, and I just kind of let him take the lead, but that was not his role, and that's not actually what he needed to feel more calm and for more peace and to feel like he could trust me. And so he didn't trust me, and he was a tyrant when we'd go on walks, and he would destroy my apartment, and he would bite through my couch, and I'd take him on walks, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this dog. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't train him better on walks, because I didn't like taking him on walks because I would stress me out, because he was also a strong dog. But again, not aggressive, never got any fights. He was a perfect angel dog, but just wanted to play. And then he would hurt himself because he would jump, and it just was stressful. And I didn't understand. I watched videos of dogs, and I watched people train dogs, and it just, nothing was really clicking. And the way that they would train the dog, I would try, and it wouldn't work for Rudy, was his name. And then I found this one trainer specifically for GSPs, because he was a German Short-Haired Pointer, very energetic dogs, right under Vizslas. He talked about how this is how every dog works, but specifically for German Short-Haired Pointers, they're very, very smart, very energetic. In order for them to feel calm and safe, they need to know that they can trust you and that you are in charge. And so if you're not showing that, and you're not showing them that you've got it and that you're in charge and you know where you should go, then they're not going to trust you. And so that's just going to make them anxious because they can't trust like their human who they've imprinted upon. And so that causes them to act up because they're distressed. For me, that was a wake-up call. I felt really guilty because I didn't know that that's how dogs worked, okay? And I know, excuse me, I did research on him before I got him, but I think I just trusted that my ex-husband was doing the training part when they went on walks because I never walked him because that was his job because he would go on runs all the time. He was trained like he could sit, he could lie down, he could roll over, he could do those things, but he never was trained on walking specifically and like listening off leash, stuff like that. So then after like 6 months, I was like, I need to fix this because I want him to be happy. I want to be happy. We just deserve a better life than this. Like, I know we can get to a better place. And so after I watched that guy, I started to train Rudy on walks. And that took like 2 hours a day to retrain, rewire his brain on how he thinks about us going on walks. And also a quick shout out to my fiance, Keaton. He was so patient with me when we first met because I was still very chronically sick with OCD and I was not eating. I was depressed and it was just, my apartment was disgusting. And he was the one that was like, you need to do a better job at being a parent to this dog. He's so anxious, I can tell. And he kind of called me out in the best way. So Rudy didn't trust me at all. It was just chaos. It just felt chaotic. So he made my life harder because he couldn't trust me with leading. He couldn't trust me with being stern. There was no consistency and routine either. And so I had to change all of those things. So first on the list was consistency. So it took hours a day to start to train him just on walks. Another thing that the guy said to help me when I started training him on walks was he said that the dog really shouldn't be the one that's on alert and they shouldn't be the one that's like looking around for danger because that's your job as the human, and that's just going to create a better trust between you and your dog. And they're going to be more obedient. They're actually going to get in less danger. They're not going to run onto the road because they trust you. So when I first started out, we would go back and forth almost on the same block. We would go and then he would start to pull and then I'd say, come. And I would turn and I would start walking the other way. And then he would start to pull and I'd be, come. And I would twist and I would turn, and you only use one word. And we did that so many times, like probably hundreds of times, because it taught him that he's not in charge. I'm in charge of where we're going. He doesn't have to watch where we're going. I'm in charge. And so he started to eventually kind of obey what I was saying. And then that escalated to where he wasn't pulling as much. He wasn't barking at other dogs trying to play. He was looking at me all the time. Like when there was a turn, he didn't just go. He looked to me. He would stop and then I would choose and then he would keep going. From that, I was able to go to this big park. I would take him off leash. We would try it off leash. So I would walk, tell him to stay. I'd walk. I'd say heel. He'd run to my right. He would sit and heel. Perfect boy. If I just went like this, like hit my left heel, he would come heel on the left. If I hit my right heel or right hip, he would come on my right and heel. If I lifted my leg, he would go under and sit. And this is all off leash. There would be so many dogs running around. And that took about 6 months to 8 months, maybe 6 to 8 months of rigorous training, like every day rewiring his brain and also just figuring out our relationship and rewiring the dynamic of that relationship. That changed my life. That changed his life. He was perfect angel baby little boy dog. He would heel. I'd say heel. He could be a freaking mile away. And I'd say heel. He would sprint and sit. Nothing else. Didn't need a treat. Didn't need nothing. Just listen to every single thing that I said. We got crazy with tricks. Like I would try to teach him all the things that I'd see these really good dog trainers do online. And he was so smart and he just wanted to be trained and he just wanted someone to take charge. We also stayed consistent with our walking. I would take him to the park for like 2 hours and I would throw that ball so freaking far with a little fetch thing, the little thrower. we did that for like 2 hours a day early in the morning. And so he knew that he was going to get his energy out because he could trust me. He knew that I was paying attention to where we were going. Oh, now I miss him. Crap, now I miss my dog. Sometimes I'll just pray and just ask God that someday, even though he's not dead, by the way, he's just, I had to give him up to this sweet couple that they're young. They go on hikes all the time. I'm a single, I was a single girl and I needed to work and I couldn't work from home anymore. I had to go in office and I didn't want him to have a life stuck in a tiny apartment with someone that couldn't really be there for him all day that he needed, because he needed that. And so I gave him up to a very nice couple, and they send me pictures every once in a while and he's thriving. But I do miss him a lot because we worked on that dynamic for so long. Long story short, he just needed to know that he could trust me. He needed to know, in order to act right, he needed to know that he could rely on me, he could trust me, and that I had his back. And once I was able to show him that, and I took control and I was like, okay, you're not running the show anymore. Let me do this. Let me handle this. He was, again, perfect, sweet angel boy. And that taught me a lot about life, but also I want to train 1,000,000 dogs. But most importantly, back to the podcast whole thing, back to the point of the podcast, is sometimes I feel like there's parts of us that just need us to take charge because we can. And even though it feels so heavy, and I'm not saying that it's going to be easy or that there's these feelings aren't so overwhelming sometimes where you can't really do anything, maybe physically or mentally, you just have to let it happen for a second. But you can always choose and you can always take charge. And so I think there's parts of us, like my dog Rudy, that was waiting for us to just take charge and be able to count on us, that we're going to do the good things for ourselves, that we're going to talk to ourselves kindly, that we're going to maybe set boundaries with people, that we're going to go back to church or go back to school or do something that you actually really want to do and want to learn about, want to grow in. That sometimes our shame or whatever keeps us stuck and we don't want to do anything, so we don't, and then nothing changes. When we start to take charge of our own lives and when we save ourselves and we start to go towards the things that actually help us and actually make us be better, and we take that responsibility, for me, I feel like that voice has kind of gone down a little bit. And even though it's still there and it's always been there, it's not as powerful. And I recognize that it actually doesn't control me as much as I thought it had to. It doesn't have to control you. And it takes a lot of bravery to break free of that mindset or that toxic relationship with shame or, not letting anything positive be said about you. So basically what I'm trying to say is accept the compliments. Okay. Well, that's that for that part of the podcast. Let's do a Dear Abby. I'm tired of this, Grandpa. That's too dang bad. Dear Abby, do you ever wonder why you are the way that you are? I deal with many mental health issues like you, and sometimes I freak myself out learning and reading about childhood trauma. Do you think your mental health struggles could be related to childhood trauma, or is it truly biological, environmentally induced? Very grateful for you. You make me feel less alone. Yellow heart. Okay, interesting question. I have no research on this, nor do I have any knowledge of this matter. So with that being said, I have listened to a lot of therapists talk about this and psychologists, and I've done my own work with this personally. I don't know. It's a good question because my brain is like farting right now. So I apologize if I just can't think of anything. I mean, I think everything that we are now is obviously from how we developed as a child, right? Because maybe not everything, but a lot of us and a lot of how we are is how we developed as a child. I mean, there's definitely genetic components, but even then I feel like some of my understanding of genetic components is sometimes you could have like an on and an off switch, and this could totally be wrong. I absolutely know zero things about anything, okay? maybe the way that we're raised and the way that certain things happen, people may be more susceptible to, for example, with OCD, could maybe be more susceptible to having that genetic component switched on in your brain. And that could be due to experiences that you had in childhood. But it also could be later on in your life if you have someone that's close to you that dies, or, you know, if you have something traumatic happen, like an assault of some kind, then that does sometimes trigger the OCD. And so that genetic component is switched on, and then you have it for, you know, however long, maybe the rest of your life. So I think a lot of who we are now, depending on your age, definitely we learned and developed in childhood, but that's both good and bad stuff. But I think there's definitely a huge genetic component in there. I don't know if I really had trauma when I was a little kid. If I do, I don't remember it. So I'm not really one to speak on that. I mean, I had definitely some experiences that weren't super positive, that were pretty negative, but I don't know if it classifies as like a big T trauma. But I don't think every part of us is, you know, from childhood trauma, and anything bad about us isn't always connected to trauma. I think sometimes people, it's just like life is hard and things really complicated and can be really messy. And so it might not be a huge traumatic event, but maybe just some kids were mean to you for a little bit, said some hurtful things to you, and now sometimes those thoughts come back in, and so that sometimes drives some of your behaviors. But it's not like a huge thing, and you're able to kind of stop it and then you move on. So I don't think that stuff is like childhood trauma. I think just kids can be rude, but there's definitely childhood trauma that people have that literally makes them feel stuck in like their child brain. And it's very real and it's very intense from what I understand when that is the case. But I think for a lot of us, it's not that type of a trauma because your whole brain isn't altered. But I definitely have times where I do feel like I'm a helpless little girl. Usually during therapy, if we're doing a lot of exposures and we're kind of getting to the root cause of some things or the root feelings and fears, that definitely comes up where I feel like a little girl, and I don't feel like I'm her now, but I remember how I felt when I was a little girl. And that's the only thing I can really think of that definitely developed something in more of a negative way in my life. But I do think about why I am the way that I am sometimes. I used to get really caught up in it. I think you can get kind of obsessive about why you are the way that you are, and you start to dissect everything until you start to feel kind of like a robot almost. And so for me, I've stopped looking into why I am the way that I am, and just, I love the way that I am. And if there's some things that it's really hard to change, but I really want to change it, then I do look into why I am the way that I am. But more than that, I look into mostly how to change and what I want to be. Because sometimes when I just focus on why I am the way that I am, I feel like it makes me more stuck. But sometimes when I learn that, plus focusing on like the trajectory moving forward, I feel like that is more helpful for me, because then I feel like I can grow into someone new. I can grow into myself or who I'm meant to be. Well, that's a good question. I kind of want to think about that more and, I don't know, do something about it later or think about it later. But that's interesting. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I hope you guys had a great Halloween or will have a great Halloween. I think it's coming out on Halloween. I think it's Halloween today. Is Halloween on the 31st? I don't know. Happy Halloween. Go get candy. Go steal some kids' candy today. Go walk around the block and steal some kids' candy bag today. Ooh. Okay, love you guys. Bye. 우회전 taking a ride to Jonathan. 눈치 보면서 들어가야 할 때 찾아. 나머진 바빠. 개설레임 바꾸는 사람.